The ranger found only one shoe at the edge of the cliff. It was small, pink, and still tied. Beside it, scratched into the dirt with a stick, were 3 words that made no sense. "Don't trust him." The child who wrote those words had vanished completely, and the family standing behind the ranger had no explanation for what had happened to their daughter. The Morrison family had planned this trip for months. David and Karen Morrison lived in Columbus, Ohio, with their 2 children. Emma was 10 years old, bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. Her younger brother Lucas was 7, quiet and shy, often following his sister wherever she went. The family needed this vacation desperately, as David had been working long hours at his accounting firm, and Karen felt they were drifting apart. They chose Glacier National Park in Montana for their adventure. David had visited the park as a child with his own father, and he wanted to share those memories with his children. They rented a cabin near the western entrance, a cozy wooden structure surrounded by towering pine trees and stunning mountain views. The first 2 days were perfect, filled with hiking, wildlife, watching, and family dinners by the fireplace. On the morning of the 3rd day, they decided to hike the Avalanche Lake Trail. It was a moderate path, suitable for children, and the destination promised breathtaking scenery. The weather was clear and cool, perfect conditions for a mountain adventure. Emma was especially excited because her father had promised to teach her how to use his old compass, a gift from his father decades ago. The hike began without any problems. Lucas complained about his feet hurting after the first mile, so they stopped for snacks and water. Emma ran ahead occasionally, but she always stayed within sight of her parents. Karen took photographs of the wild flowers along the trail, while David pointed out different bird species to the children. Everything felt normal, peaceful, and exactly what the family needed. Around noon, they reached a fork in the trail that David did not remember from his childhood visit. The main path continued toward Avalanche Lake, but a smaller trail branched off toward a rocky overlook. A weathered wooden sign indicated the overlook was only a quarter-mile away. David suggested they take the short detour to see the view before continuing to the lake. The overlook trail was narrower and steeper than expected. Karen expressed concern about Lucas managing the climb, so David offered to carry him on his shoulders. Emma walked ahead, holding the compass her father had given her, pretending to be an explorer discovering new territory. She disappeared around a bend in the trail, but her parents could still hear her humming a song from her favorite movie. Then the humming stopped. Karen called out for Emma, but there was no response. David quickened his pace, rounding the bend with Lucas still on his shoulders. The trail opened to a small clearing with a stunning view of the valley below, but Emma was not there. David called her name again, louder this time, with an edge of panic in his voice. They searched the immediate area for 20 minutes. Karen's voice grew hoarse from shouting, and Lucas began to cry. There was nowhere for Emma to hide. No caves or dense brush where a child might wander. The clearing ended at a cliff edge with a drop of several hundred feet. David refused to look over that edge, his mind blocking the possibility that his daughter might have fallen. A couple hiking the main trail heard the commotion and offered to help. They searched in expanding circles, while Karen stayed at the clearing in case Emma returned. 1 hour passed, then 2. Finally, the male hiker ran to the nearest ranger station and returned with 2 park rangers and a search coordinator. The lead ranger, a woman named Patricia Clearwater, had worked in the park for 15 years. She immediately noticed something strange about the scene. There were no footprints leading away from the clearing in any direction. The ground was soft from recent rain, perfect for tracking, yet the only visible prints belonged to the Morrison family and the helpful hikers. As the sun began to set, Ranger Clearwater made the discovery that would haunt the investigation for months. Near the cliff edge, partially hidden by a rock, she found Emma's pink hiking shoe. It was still tied, as if it had been carefully removed and placed there, and beside the shoe, scratched into the dirt, were those 3 disturbing words. "Don't trust him." The search continued through the night with flashlights and thermal imaging equipment. A helicopter arrived at dawn, scanning the valley floor for any sign of the missing girl. Dogs were brought in, but they lost Emma's scent at the exact spot where her shoe was found. It was as if she had simply evaporated into the mountain air. Investigators began interviewing the family separately. Karen was devastated, barely able to speak through her tears. Lucas kept repeating that Emma had been acting strange that morning. whispering to herself and looking over her shoulder. When asked about the message scratched in the dirt, David's face went pale, but he insisted he had no idea what it meant. On the fourth day of the search, a hiker found a small notebook wedged between rocks about half a mile from the clearing. It belonged to Emma, filled with drawings and short entries written in her careful handwriting. The final pages made investigators look at David Morrison with new suspicion. Emma had written about strange phone calls her father received late at night. She described hearing him argue with someone named Marcus, a name neither Karen nor the children recognized. She wrote about finding cash hidden in her father's briefcase, thick bundles wrapped in rubber bands. And in her final entry, dated the morning of the disappearance, she wrote something chilling. "I think Daddy is in trouble. Someone is following us. I saw the same man at the gas station and at the cabin. He has a scar on his cheek." David broke down during his next interview. He confessed that he had borrowed money from dangerous people to cover gambling debts. Marcus was a loan shark operating out of Cleveland, and David owed him over $200,000. He had been receiving threatening calls for months, warnings that his family would pay the price if he did not settle his debt. He never told Karen because he was ashamed and terrified. Investigators traced Marcus to a criminal organization with known connections to kidnapping and extortion. They raided his operation and arrested several members, but Marcus himself had disappeared. Among the seized documents, they found photographs of the Morrison family taken over several weeks, including images from inside Glacier National Park. 8 days after Emma vanished, an anonymous tip led rangers to an abandoned mining cabin 12 miles from the original search area. Inside, they found Emma Morrison, frightened but unharmed. She had been held by 2 men who fled when they heard helicopters approaching the area. Emma told investigators that the men kept asking about money and mentioned her father's name repeatedly. The reunion was captured by local news cameras. Karen collapsed into her daughter's arms, sobbing with relief. Lucas clung to his sister's hand and refused to let go. David stood apart from his family, watching with tears streaming down his face, knowing that his secrets had nearly destroyed everything he loved. Marcus was captured 3 weeks later at the Canadian border. He and his accomplices faced federal kidnapping charges. David cooperated fully with authorities, providing testimony that helped dismantle the criminal network. He pleaded guilty to illegal gambling and received probation. But the greater punishment was the damage to his family. Karen filed for divorce 6 months after the incident. She could not forgive the lies, the hidden life that had put their children in danger. Emma received counseling and slowly returned to her normal self, though she never again asked about her father's compass. Lucas rarely spoke about that day on the mountain. David Morrison now lives alone in a small apartment in Cincinnati. He attends support groups for gambling addiction and writes letters to his children that mostly go unanswered. The pink hiking shoe was returned to the family, but Karen could not bear to keep it. She donated it to a missing children's foundation, where it sits in a display case, a reminder that danger can hide in the most familiar faces. Emma recently turned 13. When asked about the message she scratched in the dirt, she explained that she had seen the scarred man watching from the trees just before she was grabbed. She wanted to warn her mother without alerting the man. Those 3 words were meant to save her family. Written by a brave child who understood that sometimes the monsters are not strangers at all. Some trips change families forever. The Morrisons learn that secrets carry a weight that eventually crushes everything beneath them. And somewhere in Glacier National Park, the wind still whispers through that empty clearing. Carrying memories of the day a simple vacation became a nightmare that no one could have predicted.